Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. Appreciate it. So let me start by saying this. I am a systems thinker, which means, so ever since I was little, I think I was probably a systems thinker. It used to frustrate my parents because every time they gave me a Christmas present, I'd take it apart, like within a day, because I wanted to see how the thing was put together and how the assembly process worked, and I tried to figure it out. The problem is, these toys that I would take apart at 4 and 5 years old never went back together the same way, at least not at 4 or 5, right? I had to learn a few things before that would happen very well. But I'm a systems thinker. I like to think about how things function. And specifically, we're going to talk about how to improve success rates with our business initiatives tonight. And systems thinking is one of the most important things that you can do as a business professional in order to affect positive change in the business environment, in the business ecosystem. Our businesses are systems, and our functional groups and departments are systems within systems. And they're systems with all these interconnected variables, patterns of interconnection, patterns of disconnection, all of the strengths and weaknesses and beauty that goes with that in our systems. So systems thinking is, in my opinion, very important to understand and very important to be able to do in order to drive changes in the business ecosystem. That being said, what I want to kind of unpack for you tonight is a look at several different business models that have been developed over decades, and really kind of pull those together into a framework that will help you think about your business and think about how you deliver performance to key stakeholder groups from your business. And so I haven't created anything new in this. These are hopefully models, frameworks, ideas that you've been exposed to throughout your career and throughout your education. So another presentation note before we kind of jump in here. You've got a handout. And in the back of that handout is a reference list. So you have a list of sources that this information comes from. And at the end of the presentation, we'll have some kind of credits rolling by that cite those very same sources. And then if you have, or you happen to pick up a copy of my book that this presentation is based off of, there's an extensive reference list in there as well. So let's kind of dive in. And I want to start with a premise. And that premise is this, that our businesses exist to deliver value. I think everyone would agree with me on that. Our businesses exist to deliver value. And our businesses deliver value to one of 4 key stakeholder groups. The first of which, and arguably the most important, are our customers. So as a business, we want to run an effective business. We have to deliver products and services to the marketplace that people want to purchase from us. And we want them to purchase those products and services from us versus a competitor, or versus substituting for some other product or service versus what we're offering. So our businesses deliver value by producing products and services that people want to purchase. Second key stakeholder group is employees. Our businesses deliver value to employees by enabling people an opportunity to deploy their knowledge and skills in a productive manner, and in return to get back fair compensation for their labor and for their contribution. A third very important stakeholder group are investors. So it takes a lot of money to kind of run a business. You want to develop new product, develop new services, invest in your business. Sometimes you need people to help you with that investment, be it shareholders or financial institutions. Those investors expect, and rightfully so, should expect a fair return on their investment. So a very important stakeholder group. And the fourth one are partners. Every business, no matter what you do, has partners, upstream and downstream partners. Upstream partners that provide you inputs, downstream partners that help you take these products and services to the marketplace. And I'm also the firm opinion that every single person in this room, every single person in your company ought to be able to trace their value contribution back to one of these key stakeholder groups. So if you're If you're a machine operator and what you do every day is stamping out parts that goes downstream and gets assembled into a product that is consumed by another business or a consumer, you are contributing value to customers. If you're an FP&A director and you run an FP&A group and your team is out there pulling information out of databases and data warehouses and generating operational insights that you then hand over to the operations team, and they take that information and they fine-tune that operation so that we can extract additional margin out of it. As an FP&A director and FP&A team, you're contributing value to other employees in your operations team, and you're also contributing value to that investor community because you're delivering improved margin. It could be a project manager, program manager, which I think we have a room full of them here today, a project manager who maybe you're in charge of managing software releases and different sprints and getting these applications out to the marketplace. And applications that are consumed, so you're benefiting consumers. And if you're going through some kind of a distribution channel, benefiting and adding value to downstream partners. So again, first premise is all of our businesses exist to deliver value. And that's value to these four stakeholder groups. And second is that we all ought to be able to trace our contribution and what we add as individuals into our businesses as well. But pull back the curtain of the business for a second here. Every single one of our businesses, every single industry faces obstacles. So even if I'm a $2 billion business today, generating a 25% gross margin, and I aspire to run a $2 billion business tomorrow, generating a 25% gross margin, and I don't want to change anything about my product and services mix to do that, I still have to get better year over year, even if it's as simple as a supplier passing me a 5% price increase, or as is usually the case, many suppliers passing me a 5% price increase. You still have to get better. You have to do something different, because if I do nothing different tomorrow than what I'm doing today, I've just absorbed a margin erosion. So the environment that we work in, kind of the way things work, is that we have to constantly be getting better. And we do this in our businesses every year. I've been in several different industries, and there is no exception to this. Every single industry, every single executive team will come out and say, we're going to grow by X this year, and here's how we're going to do it. And they express their strategies for how they're going to go get that growth that they're looking for. And this is one of those models that I mentioned. This is an adapted version of Ansoff's matrix, if that sounds familiar to you. And what we do in our businesses is Ansoff's matrix says that you've got two different ways, that really two different themes that define strategies. Across the horizontal axis is products and services, and vertically you have markets. And so we could say, you know what, we're really happy with our product mix. And we're really happy with the market that we operate in. So we just want to grow our presence and sell more of that product in our current market. That is a market share strategy. So I'm going after additional market share with an existing product mix and an existing market. Now I could say, you know, I'm really happy with my product and service mix, but I think I want to add a few more features to this product, add a few more capabilities. That's moving along that horizontal axis, and that's a product extension strategy. I could take that even further and say, you know what, I've got these 4 products, but I think we need to develop a new 5th product. That would be a product development strategy. And the same holds true on the vertical axis. If I'm happy with my market, maybe I'm operating today in the United States, but I'm not in all 50 states, and I want to go into all 50 states. That would be market expansion. If I wanted to go outside the United States and say, penetrate Western Europe, or Japan, or Latin America, that would be a market development strategy. And so you've got these 2 axes that you can define your strategies around. And if you do both, if you pursue the product and the market approach, you end up in these upper right-hand 4 quadrants, which is diversification. And what this says is the further up and to the right you go, the more risky it is. And the further down and to the left you are, the less risk that you're taking on with your product strategies. So in order to kind of tease this out, what I'd like to do is just use a hypothetical example. And so tonight, we're going to be in the business of producing a blue pen. A blue pen. Right now, today, as a business, we sell $50 million of this blue pen every year. And we have a 10% market share in the blue pen industry, which means it's a $500 million market. And we want to grow by 8%. It's a fairly reasonable growth goal, I think. I mean, it's pretty typical. Most companies will put out there a 7 to 10% growth goal. And so we want to grow the blue pen market by 8%, which means we want to go from 50 million to 54 million in revenue, and we want to go from 10% market share to 10.8% market share. And our leadership team has gotten together and has decided that we're going to do that with these 3 initiatives. A pricing initiative, we're going to establish a new customer loyalty department, some promotions, and we're going to go after a new inventory management system. Now, a couple more things you need to know about the blue pen industry. It's been around for a very long time. It is highly commoditized. So in order for us to capture that market share and gain those extra sales, we believe as a leadership team that we have to take what's currently a retail price of this blue pen at $4.59 and take that down to $4.19. There's some price sensitivity there. In addition to that, we've been getting feedback from our retail distribution channel that we currently deliver this blue pen to our retailers from order to receipt in 32 hours. And they're telling us we need to get that down to 24 hours. So we got to shave off some time as well because we're not as competitive in this space. So that's the scenario we're going to use. The leadership team has picked these 3 initiatives. How good do you feel about those initiatives? Every initiative set that I see from businesses scares me a little bit, and it scares me because of this. Across industries, across different types of initiatives, we have decades of history of failure. We have high failure rates with many, many different initiatives across many different types of initiatives. And so I'm a little bit of a research geek. I mean, Renee said, you know, I've got my doctorate, I've done a lot of research and written a book. I collect, this is going to sound bad, I collect research. So I've got a matrix that I keep of qualitative, quantitative studies. I tabulate how many of each are out there. I track success and failure rates. And I want to share that information with you here tonight. So I'm going to look across several different types of initiatives, and we're going to see the failure rates that have been put up over 25 years. First up, and I know it's probably near and dear to some of your hearts, is IT. IT initiatives over the last 25 years put up this kind of a plot for failure rates. These are failure rates. When you average out 25 years worth of data for IT initiatives, we put up failure rates at 66% with a fairly broad range of 45%. Okay, you're not alone if you're in IT. Near and dear to my heart, organizational design. I've done years of organizational design. Org design initiatives, org structure changes, put up a 72% failure rate, average over 25 years. A little bit tighter range, but 72% failure rate. Next up, process reengineering. Process design initiatives put up a failure rate of 67% with a 20% range over 25 years. Take a look at the next one, incentives. So on average, incentives over the years put up a 71% failure rate. And we're going to talk about that peak right there at 100% in a couple of minutes. It's a very interesting one. Software development. Software development averages 52% failure rate over 25 years with a fairly broad range itself. And then we get into change initiatives overall. This one's written about a lot. A lot of people like to talk about change initiatives, putting up a 70% failure rate. Actually, if you look back over the years and average it out, it's 65%. And business initiatives, just general business initiatives. These could be strategic changes in your business, different products like we talked about, 68% failure rate. When you layer them all on top of each other, they look like this. When you average them all out, they look like this. So overall, across all of these different types of initiatives, for the last 25 years, we fail 66% of the time with these initiatives, which means we have a 34% chance of success. So back to our blue pen, and these 3 initiatives that our leadership team has put out there, the statistics that we just looked at, those failure rates that we just looked at, make me a little nervous about whether or not we can actually execute this. Because what you're telling me as a business leader is that I've got a 34% chance of success. That's what the data shows, a 34% chance of success. All right, so to be a fair researcher, let's bring back up these statistics. Come on, there we go. I have to give equal treatment to the counter-argument. And there are some very valid counter-arguments out there. So we've got 2 of them, two of the most common counter-arguments to these statistics. The first one being, isn't this all merely just conjecture? I mean, there's a lot of stuff out there, we read about it. Isn't it just conjecture? Isn't there a lack of empirical evidence to support these kind of failure rates? Well, here's a scattering of the empirical research that's out there. No, it's not lacking empirical research. We'd like to see more. Absolutely would like to see more, but just about every single one of these types of initiatives has empirical research behind it. A couple that are fairly interesting to me. Software development, if you're in software development, that's this light blue line. If you look at the last 15 years in software development and average the last 15 years out, the failure rate's actually quite a bit lower than the 25-year average. So that would tell me that we're getting a little bit better in software development, which is great. Look at that incentives one. There was a 4-year longitudinal study done in incentives, and I believe it was in the construction industry, 4-year longitudinal study, that looked at differing types of incentives that were applied to drive performance. At the end of that longitudinal study, the conclusion that they put forward was that every single one of those incentive plans were 100% failure. They did not correlate to driving improved performance. So again, if I'm a business leader, I'm not feeling too good right about now. I mean, I think we ought to be able to do a lot better than that. If I'm going to spend millions of dollars in business initiatives, I want, even if you average these, you do a visual average on these empirical studies that are up here, you're kind of ending up at the same point, 65 to 70% failure rate. So if I'm going to put millions of dollars into a business initiative, and let's say that we're off. Let's say we've got a 10% margin of error, or a 15% margin of error. You're still looking at a 50-50 shot. So you're going to tell your CEO that you want to spend millions of dollars in business initiatives with a 50-50 shot? Not me. I want a better guarantee that my investment's going to deliver results. Second counterpoint, doesn't it depend a lot on how you define success? I mean, come on. So that organizational design project that we did with the sales force had 15 requirements stacked against it. Yeah, all right, so we didn't hit all of them. We hit about half of them. But doesn't that mean it's a 50% success? ERP systems. I've done 4 ERP implementations in my career. I hope not to ever do another one. I've done 4 of them. And from experience, I can tell you that the requirements documents will fill boxes. I mean, these things are hundreds of pages long. And yeah, we don't always hit all the requirements. We don't ever hit all the requirements on an ERP implementation. We don't. But can't we consider it a partial success? And these are valid arguments. They're arguments that I've made personally on some of these projects in my career. The fallacy in those arguments, they're good arguments, okay? They're good arguments well-founded by very experienced professionals often. But they're reductionist arguments. So you're looking at defending an organizational design process versus looking at what we were trying to achieve as a business. You're looking at defending systems implementation versus what we were trying to achieve as a business. And so let's go back to that organizational design one again. If what we were really trying to do in redoing this sales force, this outside sales force, is to improve contact rates with our customers so that our salespeople are connecting more often with our customers, with better quality conversations with those customers, we believe that that increases customer purchasing activity, which then converts into improved revenue. What we're really trying to go after in that organizational design effort is improved revenue. Yeah, there might be 15 requirements on there, But what we're really trying to change in the business ecosystem is a revenue growth goal that's based on contact rate with customers. That's the essence of it. In the ERP implementation, if what we're really trying to do is improve inventory visibility across my supply chain, from raw materials down to finished goods, because once I know where it is and what I have, I can better respond to ordering, so that overall I can reduce inventory quantities, which means I can free up cash, which allows me to then reinvest that cash in the business. What we're really after is freed up cash. That's what we're trying to do with the business ecosystem. All of this lead up, all of this context, to re-emphasize to you that our businesses are ecosystems. Our functional groups are systems within systems, all of which is there to deliver value to our customers, our employees, our investors, and our business partners. So what I want to unpack for you next is a framework that I've put together that helps me, and I hope helps you, frame up the business, think about the business, that allows you to, when fully exercised, achieve higher success rates with your business initiatives. So let's start. And the first graphic is this, and we've already talked about it a little bit. Every business is in place to take inputs, run those inputs through its production engine, produce outputs that are consumed in the marketplace. Those are our products and services. Every business must also figure out how to differentiate itself in the marketplace so that not everything that we do is identical to our competitors, right? Those are called, I use a model called value disciplines. This comes from work that was done by Tiercy and Wiersema probably a decade and a half ago, and it's included in your references section. Value discipline says this, and very simply, let me get this to advance, there are three themes for how you differentiate your products in the marketplace. One is product leadership, product or service leadership, and that says this, that the product that I'm producing into the marketplace is better than anyone else. Maybe it has some features and functionality that my competitors don't have. Maybe it's better styling than anyone else has. Kind of the quintessential example of this is Apple. So the Apple iPhone, the Apple iPod kind of trumped everybody, not just in terms of features and functionality, but styling. The second one is operational excellence. So this is where I compete, I differentiate my products and services based on maybe it's price, maybe it's quality, time to market. Amazon would be a current and relevant example for operational excellence. You can go to that Amazon marketplace, you get anything you want delivered to your door. They're competing on operational excellence. Customer intimacy is the third one, the third theme for how you can differentiate. And customer intimacy says that I'm competing in this category if either I know something unique about my customers that allows me to deliver a certain product or service mix at the right time in the right way that really matches their needs, or it could also be in customer service as an example. A local example of a company that competes in this category is Sewell. So if anyone's done any business with Sewell, they compete in customer intimacy. Your service experience at Sewell is second to none. It's wonderful. They take very good care of you. They charge you for it, but they take very good care of you. So we have products and services that we take into the marketplace. We have to differentiate those products and services so that people want to buy from us versus buying from our competitors or substituting for something else. Now, inside that production engine, it looks like this. This is an adaptation from Porter's value chain, which hopefully looks familiar to you. And so our companies can be described using this model. And the first thing, and there are some adaptations up here, so there are some changes, and I'll go over those. I won't unpack all of Porter because we could be here for a very long time, but just in highlight, so in Porter's value chain model, we have direct functions and indirect functions. The direct functions are on the left, and direct meaning that they directly impact or manipulate those inputs and turn them into outputs for us, everything from supply chain down through IT. And the indirect functions are off to the right. Indirect meaning that those functions are there to enable the direct ones to do their work. Some changes from what was put out in Porter's model. Supply chain in Porter's model was titled inbound logistics. Operations had very much a manufacturing bent to it. Market delivery was outbound logistics. And IT wasn't down there in the direct line, it was over to the right, and the indirect line is technology. So there was, when Porter released this a couple of decades ago, 2.5 decades ago, we were very much in kind of the tail end of the industrial economy. Everything that we were doing was very manufacturing oriented, so the model was very manufacturing oriented. But if you're in the business of producing software today, as an example, and what you bring to the marketplace is an application that goes to an app store and people download it, well, you don't have a whole lot of tractor trailers out there moving your apps around. So outbound logistics doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So I've retitled that to market delivery, kind of broadened some of these terms for us. Let me comment on IT for just a second. So in Porter's model, technology, it wasn't IT, it was technology, was an indirect function. In today's day and age, depending on what kind of a business you're in, IT can be either direct or indirect or both. So if you're in a business where what you produce to the marketplace is an IT-based product or service, it's a direct function. If you're producing blue pens, so it's a hard product, if you're producing blue pens, IT is probably an indirect function because you're doing things like desktop support and setting up your network and managing it and things like that. Human capital management is a little bit of an expansion from HR. It includes a couple of different things. Management systems was not in Porter's model, and that's because it's a recently developed field over the last couple of decades. So this is everything that our leadership team or that you as a leadership team has to do to run the business on a day-to-day basis. It includes things like metrics and dashboards and scorecarding. It's what sets up the cadence for the business. And then financial resource management is managing our operational and capital expenditures and assets. All of that together comprises what is called organizational capabilities. So how we invest in these 10 areas, the resources that we put in there, how we set them up, defines what every single one of our organizations is capable of delivering. And these three things, products and services, value disciplines, and organizational capabilities, if you remember when this picture first came up, there's a symbol behind those three triangles, and it's one of the infinity symbols. I believe it's the Celtic infinity symbol. And I put that up there because these three things constantly interact with each other. If you change anything in there, something else is going to change. Because every business system is designed to get the results that it's currently getting. So if you start making changes, something's going to happen, something else is going to happen. We make a change to organizational capability, it will impact potentially your products and services or the value disciplines of those products and services. So it's a system that works together. Now, if you want to drive organizational capability changes, there are 7 disciplines that you have that you can use to change the capabilities of the organization. So we're going to zoom in on those and take a look at them. There are 7 of them, as I said. And those 7 are organizational structure, so how we align our resources. Decision rights, so what are the key decisions in our business? Who gets to make them, how and when? Processes, so a definition of how work moves through the organization, how we take things from inputs to outputs. People, so putting the right people at the right place with the right skills at the right time. Incentives, making sure that we are incentivizing our people and possibly also incentivizing our partners upstream and downstream to get the behaviors that we need to out of our value chain. Systems, so automating work and making sure that that work is repeatable from an execution standpoint. And then tools, making sure people have the tools that they need in order to do the jobs that we've asked them to do. I use an analogy in describing these 7 disciplines. It's actually from years ago. First home that I owned, the driveway was kind of torn up. We had a blacktop driveway, and I was not happy with it at all. So I did my due diligence. I called a few contractors out to give me competitive bids. And one of the contractors, I engaged with them and I said, I want a concrete driveway. I want a cement driveway. He goes, well, hold on a minute, you don't want a cement driveway. What do you mean I don't want a cement driveway? He goes, well, cement is really very brittle. I'm kind of looking at him like, come on, you're pulling my leg here, right? You don't want a cement driveway. He goes, well, cement is a combination of ash and lime, basically. You mix that together and it gets hard, but it's flaky and it's brittle. What you want is a concrete driveway. And I'm thinking, okay, come on, it's semantics. You're kind of messing with me here, right? You want a concrete driveway. And concrete, the difference is we add an aggregate. We put sand in there, we put rock in there, we give that cement something to bind to. And when it can do that, it becomes much stronger. He goes, but what you really want is a steel reinforced concrete driveway. Like, come on, dude, yeah, you know what I wanted, you know what I meant. A steel reinforced concrete driveway will give you structural integrity. And if we used a washed aggregate and sand, that gets the contaminants out, it binds even better yet, and that driveway will last you 30 or 40 years. And it's the combination of these three materials that gives it structural integrity. The 7 disciplines are no different. If you bring in an organizational design expert to look at your organizational structure, they're going to find some problems with your org structure. Bring in a process expert, they'll find problems with your processes. But what you really want is someone to come in and look at the mix of these 7 disciplines that defines the capabilities that you're delivering as a total organization and to apply them in the right mix to get the change that you desire. The reality is our businesses are ecosystems. And if we want to get the results that we desire, we have to think systematically about our businesses. Let's come back to our blue pen here as an example. I keep pointing to the screen with this and the receivers over here. Our blue pen is an example. We want to drive $4 million in incremental revenue. We want to get another 0.8% in market share. Let's talk about pricing. So this pen is $4.59 today. We need to get it down to $4.19. Pens have some pretty typical components in them. So we've got the tip, we've got the barrels, we've got the thrusting, clicking mechanism, we've got a clip, an inkwell, and ink, just to name a few. And I just got a call from our ink supplier, and they told me that, hey, if we allow them to provide not just the ink, but also the inkwell together, that they can save us 20 cents at the wholesale level. When we keystone that up, that's 40 cents at the retail level. That's exactly what we needed from a pricing standpoint. So leadership team says, we got it. We're done with this one. Hold on a minute. We're not done with this one. Yeah, we've got a solution in mind, but we've got 2 buyers on this today. We got one buying ink and one buying inkwells. And what we're talking about is now combining those duties into one. And by the way, when you do that, we don't have enough work for one of these people. So we have a potential people implication, a potential organizational implication. When you combine those responsibilities, the resultant buyer needs to have the authority, the decision rights to execute those buys. So we have decision rights up here. Those have to be reflected in the system configuration so they can actually execute it. So that one simple change touches 4 disciplines. Look at the other situation with our blue pen. We wanted to go from 32 hours, shave off 8 hours of order to delivery cycle time and get it down to 24 hours. Do you think these 2 initiatives will do that? I think if we expand that inventory management one, step back and take a look at what's going on, in my opinion, we have to look at process. We have to look at what happens from order to receipt so that we can understand the timing and where the opportunities are. If we're going to make process changes, we might be working with suppliers and how our suppliers interact with our systems, how they receive orders, how those systems talk to each other. We may also have to look at incentives for how we incentivize our shippers, potentially for how we incentivize our shipping department. So again, right there, you've got multiple disciplines coming into play to affect that one change. So we operate in a business ecosystem that requires us to think systematically in order to get the changes out that we want and that we desire. And so this is the model. This is the framework. It's how you think about the business, taking inputs, through your firm's production engine into outputs and market delivery. And it's the constant interaction of products and services that you're delivering, the difference in value disciplines allows you to differentiate those products in the marketplace, and then the organizational capabilities. And our blue pen is an example of that systemic thinking that we need to apply in order to get the results that we're trying to get. It leverages all three of these. All three of them interplay constantly in our businesses. This to advance. Okay. So this is a very simple example, but I think the point is very valid. And that does set up kind of the construct. It gives you kind of a new view or a new perspective. What I want to do now is kind of step into a little bit of a different direction. I'm having advancing problems here. And I want to talk about the impact of time on an organization. And this comes from, we have some, you probably see this, we have some extra resources sitting up here on the front that you can come up and grab afterwards. If you're interested in a book, you can grab that too. This comes out of an article that I published for Forbes last year on the impact of time on organizations. And time is a very important concept to understand and how it impacts our business ecosystem. Because we are all always working to maximize effectiveness and efficiency. It's kind of the classic 2x2 matrix. And every day we go to work, we're trying to drive for improved efficiencies and improved effectiveness. And the reality of the march of time is this, that what was effective yesterday is probably not effective and efficient today, and is probably not going to be effective and efficient next year. And so we constantly find ourselves having to push up through this model year over year to improve and hit maximum effectiveness and efficiency. And our blue pen example, to bring that back in here, it's an example of that. So our retailer's telling us that there's additional price sensitivity. So we got to go from $4.59 down to $4.19 at the retail level for our blue pen. Says that we're not as efficient as we were last year or the year before. We've got to get some additional efficiency out of here. Our order to receipt cycle time, getting that down from 32 hours down to 24 hours means we're not as effective as we were in prior years. 3, 4, 5 years ago, 32 hours might have been leading the pack. Today it's not. Today it's falling short. We've got to get that down. We've got to get that maximized. Another way you can look at time is like this. So if we put back up that 8% continuous annual growth rate. So we were wanting to drive 8% growth in blue pen. And I actually went through this with an organization a few years ago in my career where I took over a team for a company that was a $500 million company. And they grew at 8% continuous annual growth rate for about 5 years. And so when that happens, year one growth takes you from 500 to 540 million. And so you make some changes along the way, right? So we got to invest a little bit here, a little bit there in order to execute to that. Year two takes you to 583 million. Year three, 630 million. Year four, 680. Year five, 735 million. I came into the role in that 4 to 5 year juncture. And what I was told as the chief risk officer was, your functions as risk management, environmental health and safety, and human resources aren't doing it for us anymore. They're not effective. They're not efficient. And oh, by the way, we're going to go from 700 million to about $1 billion in the next couple of years. We need something different out of your teams. And they were right. What was going on, 8% continuous annual growth rate, when you look at it compounded, is a 47% growth over 5 years. It's the power of compounding, right? You can do this in your bank accounts too, or in your investment portfolios. Well, we want to anyway, right? So over 5 years, you're talking a 47% increase. Now, if I was to do that with that blue pen and say, hey, we're going to go from $50 million today, and by November, 4 months from now, we're going to be at $73 million in sales. Every single one of you would tell me, hold on a minute. You want me to grow by 47% in the next 4 months? We need to look at, we're going to need some more people. I don't think our systems are going to handle it. You're going to be asking a lot from our current people. We probably need to put some different incentives in place. There are a couple areas that we have to restructure. You will very naturally start thinking through all 7 of those disciplines because it's a fairly dramatic shift. But when it sneaks up on you over time, we don't think like that. It sneaks up on us. Our businesses can very easily get to the point where we have to step back and we have to look at them systematically. We have to look at what's going on in the business. And so we come back to this model, to this picture. 47% compounded growth over 5 years is fantastic. Who would like that performance out of their businesses? I would love it. I would absolutely love it. So if we're doing that, that means we're doing some things right. So we've got to have some good products and services in play. We've got to be differentiating ourselves properly in the marketplace. So it's those org capabilities that we come back to. How are we going to deliver on that from an organizational standpoint? And so when I took over that team as the Chief Risk Officer, actually all of our indirect functions at that business had the same issue. Because when you're growing, it's a whole lot easier to think through investments in those direct functions because they directly impact what you produce, right? The indirect functions tend to fall behind. And that's what was going on here. So we put our heads together and we did exactly what this model depicts. We looked at how are we structured? What are the decision rights? Who gets to do what, decide what? What do our work processes look like? How do we change them? We picked up a couple of new systems that we needed and gave some people some new tools, and we actually did a fairly significant change in team, change in people resources as well. So it required a multiple disciplinary approach in order to get the change that we needed and wanted out of the business. And so ever and forever, any capability change that you want to drive in your business will require you pulling on one or more of these 7 disciplines. So again, the business ecosystem model, the framework to look at it, and the organizational capabilities are driven by these 7 disciplines. Okay. Now, another thing that I've heard, another statistic that I've heard, is that when it comes to like processes, let me back up to this view here. So process reengineering, process redesign initiatives. I've read several times a statistic that 85% of our CEOs are dissatisfied with their process change initiatives. There are about 400,000 CEOs in the United States, and that means that 350,000 of them are dissatisfied with those changes, dissatisfied with what it delivers. And I can believe it. I've done several process reengineering initiatives in my career. I'm an appointed master black belt, which I got when I was with a company called Motorola many eons ago. And we were getting our plants ISO certified, and we were doing some other process work. And I've done process work where we go through and we did a fantastic job mapping out our as-is processes, putting responsibility matrices to them, doing gap analysis, putting our to-be processes out there. And everyone looked at it and said, yeah, this is great. We think it'll save us money. And a few months later, you couldn't find the document anywhere because it was up in someone's cube behind something else that they were reading, and it just kind of lost interest. Well, we don't execute on these things because they're complex, they're intricate. We have interconnecting variables that we've got to deal with. It's not just a process initiative. Because when you start changing work processes like that, you have organizational implications. You start moving decision authority around in the organization. People get uncomfortable when you do that. You may not have the right talent in place with the right skills because on top of it, you're making systems changes and tools changes. And then to get all those behavioral changes in, you've got to look at how you incentivize people too. So you're touching all 7 of these things when you're doing true core process redesign. It's a significant change effort. And so it requires us to think systematically. So if we want to affect changes on our business ecosystem, it requires us to think systematically, to act systematically. So when I'm working with clients, I use a model that we've put together called IRA 7. And it's very simple. I'm going to take you through it here fairly quickly. IRIS stands for Intake, Research, and Analyze. And the 7 just means the 7 disciplines that we've looked at. So what we want to do in exercising this model is we want to, it's one of these slow down to speed up things. So I'm going to slow you down in the front end so that I can do a good job intaking, understanding your business need and what you're trying to drive as a result out of your business ecosystem. I want to engage your people so that we can do the research and analysis to get to root cause and correlations. So what do we think has to change in terms of organizational capability to get you the results that you're looking at? Then once we've got that defined, we can execute on the 7 disciplines that we need to. So I'm going to go a little bit further in depth here, expand the board, and put up the IRIS 7 model, and it looks like this. So it's simply, intake, research, and analyze, and we've got our 7 disciplines here. And I want to reiterate a point that I mentioned a few minutes ago. If you bring in an expert in any one of these 7 areas, that expert's going to find problems with that area. I guarantee it, 100% of the time, they'll find an issue. If you bring me in to do only an organizational design project, I will find opportunities for you to design your org structure a little bit better. If you bring in a process reengineering expert, they will find issues with your process, opportunities for improvement. But you may not need to invest in those things because that might not be the area that correlates to the business change you're trying to drive. So what this says is step back, do some front-end research and analysis, do a good job at the intake, understand what we're trying to drive, and then recommend the right mix of the 7. So the first thing I want to do here is I want to expand the people one for a second, because that expands into talent acquisition, talent management, and learning. So basically it means we've got the right people, talent management that they're in the right place doing the right jobs, and learning that they have the right skills to do the job. And let me unpack the first 3 disciplines up here. So org structure, decision rights, and processes. And the first thing you'll notice is that they don't line up on top of each other naturally. Each one has a little bit different method associated with it. So if you go through an organizational structure change or an organizational design process, that includes 5 steps: needs, diagnosis, design, looking at linkages to other organizational units in your company, and then implementation. Decision rights, also a 5-step process, but a little bit different. Process re-engineering, what I have up here is the DMAIC process from the Lean Sigma space. So define, measure, analyze, improve, and control. But you could also use a DMAD-D or a DMAD-V process methodology. If you want to go after continuous improvement, there are others out there. There's PDCA, that one might sound familiar to you. So one of the challenges we have is when we start looking at all 7 of these disciplines and we lay them all out up here, they're a little bit different. And you can infer an overall kind of 9-step flow to this. And you'll see this in some of this writing up here, and this is more fully explained in the book if you want to pick up a copy. But the really important point is this, that you slow down so you can speed up later. That you do the front-end work, which hits in this front end of every single one of these disciplines to understand what we're trying to do with our business ecosystem, to research the causes and correlations, and to recommend the right mix of the 7 so that you can deliver the changes in organizational capability. And that's where the real power is. It's in doing that, because organizational capabilities drives the products and services that we deliver to the marketplace and differentiates our products in the marketplace as well. These 3 kind of come together. So that's the model, that's the framework, and hopefully it helps you kind of think through what your businesses do. I mean, all of our businesses take inputs, run them through a production engine, produce outputs that the market consumes. And those products and services are differentiated. You can use a model like value disciplines to understand differentiation. All of it driven by an organizational capability mix that is affected by 7 disciplines. Now, I want to give you some counter statistics here. This stuff works. Thinking systematically about your business and about your business ecosystem works. Some research that was conducted by McKinsey a few years ago. Longitudinal research over several years. Companies and initiatives that used an ecosystem approach like I've just described to you put up success rates of 73%, up from an average over 25 years of 34%. I'll take that. Okay, that's almost double. The companies that surrounded this ecosystem approach with formalized project management and change management. So they paid attention to getting the right people on the teams, managing stakeholders, making sure that we have the right sponsorship, metrics, follow-up, and communications, went from 73% success to 83% success. They got an extra 10 points of lift off of it. It makes a difference. In my own personal experience, I can say the very same thing, where we are leading initiatives where we can get the leadership team to take a business ecosystems approach and understand the full model, we hit success rates in this 80 to 90% area. It works. It really does work. So all of our businesses, no matter what industry you're in, take inputs, run them through that production engine, those 10 functions that are identified up there, produce outputs that are consumed in the marketplace. Those are the products and services that we deliver, differentiated so our customers want to buy from us versus a competitor or some other substitute, all of which is driven by organizational capabilities. And if you need to make a change in organizational capabilities, you have 7 disciplines to leverage. So the closing statement is this, that we work in a business ecosystem, and we have to think systematically in order to get the results that we seek out of our businesses. And when we do that, it works. We can achieve much higher success rates. If we step back, slow down, do a good job in the front end, we can have better success as we execute. As the credits roll, time for Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you, Dale. I think we have time for questions. Let me just bring the mic to you.
Thank you very much. Very amazing and intriguing talk. Definitely something to ponder. And I'll give you the best compliment ever, which is I measure how engaging a conversation is by the number of times I check my phone. And tonight it's been 2, so that's great. That's record time. So my question to you goes back to the charts that you displayed earlier about the failure rate per project type. You said IT, org charts. Are there any, from the research that you've done, any obvious reasons or reasons why these projects failed? And if you contrast that with the framework that you brought up and maybe find a correlation, like they invested in people, not so much systems, they invested in, or what the tendencies are? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's an excellent question, and there are themes that come out. One of the tools that I use when I'm working with clients is a rating tool across these 7 disciplines. So a recent one that I did not too long ago was an organizational design shift, and we were trying to make changes in how this team interacted with customers and drive revenue growth in the business. And so what I had the team do in the workshop was we laid out each of these 7 disciplines and the requirements that they were trying to drive, and I gave them points. I said, apply points to how important are each one of these items in driving the success. And every single person to a T distributed these points, and you could see very clearly when you tallied them up that what we were trying to do wasn't just an organizational design shift. That in addition to that, we had to do some work with systems, we had to do some work with tools, we had to redesign incentive plans. And it really does come back to, in the research that I've looked at, it's when they miss because we've gotten myopic in our approach. We've taken kind of this reductionist approach, And we've lost sight of the entire ecosystem, and we lost sight of those 7 things that drive capability. So it's really important. You know, I said, you know, you want to slow down to speed up kind of in the front end. And so you want to do a good job on intake research and analysis so you can recommend what we have to do in those 7, the right mix of them. It is equally important, once they start executing, to time those work streams so they interact with each other properly. So to kind of you know, close out the answer to your question here, further example, the organizational structure change that we were putting in place with this client was actually a long-term, and this is pretty typical, a long-term kind of play. So at the end of our evolution, we want to be to this point, we want our teams to look like this, and we think that that's going to help drive business performance improvement. But we couldn't go there in one step. We had to phase that out and time it with the systems changes that were coming and the tools changes that were coming and the incentive plans that had to be redesigned. Because if we just pulled the trigger on the org change, and I've seen this done, I've lived through it, where companies go too fast into an org structure without having everything else in place, and it fails. And so what happens? 8, 9, 10, 12 months later, we're restructuring again. Fast forward a few months and we restructure again. And we're in this kind of restructure cycle because we're not getting the results that we wanted. And we're not getting the results that we wanted because we're not thinking systematically about our business ecosystem. So everything that I've read comes back to that. And the work that we do and the research that I've seen from companies like McKinsey just kind of underscores and emphasizes that if you take an ecosystems approach, you'll have much better success rates with your initiatives. So, did that answer your question? Yes. Okay, thank you.
Great, I'll bring the mic over to you.
So I work for a healthcare